From MTN News, this is Montana This Morning.
The future of home building in 3 dimensions.
We're excited about being able to offer a method that will, increase efficiencies and less waste.
Plus, a look back at the complicated history of Wyoming's Heart Mountain.
You would have had just kind of 4 to 5 people living in here.
And people who suffered traumatic brain injuries are finding comfort in a new support group. Good morning and welcome to Montana This Morning on this Thursday, March 16th. I'm Augusta McDonald. New this morning, all eyes will be on bank stocks during trading today after shares of one of Europe's largest banks plunged. Credit Suisse announced it will borrow nearly $54 billion from the Swiss National Bank to shore up liquidity. Investor panic led to stock losses for 4 major U.S. banks coming just days after federal regulators took over Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank of New York. Today, the U.S. Treasury Secretary will be grilled by a Senate committee. Montana Senator Steve Daines is expected to criticize how the Biden administration has handled the collapses.
These bank bailouts are going to put Montana banks and Montana families on the hook for the mismanagement of a Bay Area bank. Why is it that well-managed and sound Montana banks that didn't fail are going to be on the hook to pay for a mismanaged Bay Area bank that did? The same thing was true with President Biden's bogus student debt transfer, forcing Montanans who maybe didn't go to college to now pay for somebody else's loans.
Lawmakers are taking issue with the Biden administration's decision to repay in full all the depositors, even those with more than $250,000 in that bank, the amount insured by the FDIC. Lots to follow there, Miller. And also lots to look forward to this weekend as we kind of look forward to a little bit nicer temperatures after this week.
Absolutely. Nice and sunny this weekend, and we're going to be warming back up to seasonal by the end of the weekend, the final weekend of winter. How about that? Felt like winter yesterday. Our high only got up to about 37, a good 12 degrees below the norm. Our overnight low just a slightly below average, getting down to about 24. It was breezy at times yesterday. We're still going to see that today here in areas east of Yellowstone County. We can still have gusts 20 to 25 miles an hour today. Now, we did see some rain and some snow yesterday. Nothing really measurable here in the city. You can see our moisture totals a little bit below average, but not too bad. Snow totals just pacing slightly ahead for the month. Still behind for the season. We're going to have to wait probably until the middle of next week to see maybe another shot of some decent measurable snow heading our way, but that's a long way off and something we'll talk about a little bit later on with the main forecast coming up. 25 right now at the airport. We did see a few flurries earlier. That's starting to move out. Feels like 18. Could see some patchy fog this morning, so please be careful to go along with those slick roads. Winds out of the southwest at about 6 miles an hour. Temperatures this morning mainly in the 20s. We'll go with highs today in the 30s and 40s. Those temperatures kind of staying there for the next couple of days before the warm up. And spring starts on Monday. Spring conditions on the way, but maybe albeit briefly. Take a look at that and a whole lot more coming up.
Okay, Miller, thank you so much. And more to follow this morning in Livingston. Teachers and parents got their first chance to weigh in on the potential closure of Washington Elementary School. The district wants to move students to Winans or East Side amid budget shortages and falling enrollment. Washington employees are worried their jobs will be cut, but at a board meeting this week, the superintendent said the potential move would only affect one position.
It would be one administrative position, but that administrator would be able to move into another open position in the administrative ranks due to a retirement.
The district's budget shortfall is over $1 million. It had been relying on COVID relief funds, but those are running out. They hope to have a decision on the potential closure and consolidation by next month. The Montana Office of Public Instruction has released the federally mandated school report cards for 2021 to 22 school year. The report looks at proficiency in student growth in math and reading, student enrollment, how much money is spent per student, and graduation rates. For the state as a whole, achievement scores showed just over 1/5 of students were considered proficient in math, with just over half showing progress. And for reading scores showed 29% considered proficient, with half of those showing progress. 86% of Montana students will graduate high school in 4 years, but just 62% of those, less than 2/3, are considered college or career ready. About $13,200 are spent per student, with nearly 90% of that coming at the state and local level. Academic proficiency is measured through the Smarter Balanced Assessments for grades 3 through 8 and the ACT for 11th grade. It's been 3 years since the first case of COVID-19 appeared in Yellowstone County, and the virus still spreading in Montana. Both Fergus and Petroleum counties are currently experiencing high community levels of transmission, and many counties around the state saw cases rise to medium levels. Yellowstone County Health Officer John Felton has been following the virus since it first landed in Billings. He's seen the fear of the virus dissipate, and alongside a dip in vaccinations.
Early on, everything that we experienced was new. We had our first case, we had our first hospitalization, we had our first death. We've been through all that now, and we understand the virus better. I said early on when I was asked, when will the pandemic be over, my response was, really when society decides we're done with it. And I think we're kind of there.
The state saw nearly 600 cases last week. That averages out to about 84 cases a day. Happening at the state capitol, a bill to define a person's sex throughout Montana law as male or female just passed a preliminary vote on the Senate floor. Supporters say the bill was about creating a definition for sex separate from gender. Opponents believe it's not only discriminatory against transgender Montanans, but could have potential financial consequences from the federal government.
On a bill of this size and of this importance, to what degree is it responsible for our body to sign off on that bill that may or may not create substantial future costs to our general fund?
We can have policy discussions about where we want to use these terms later, but we need to define what those terms mean, because right now we're getting into lawsuits because these terms get conflated and we don't have clear definitions.
The bill will have to pass a final vote on the Senate floor before passing on to the House. Montana's housing crisis has been identified. We know all about it, but now the conversation shifts to solutions. Several affordable housing bills are making it through the legislature, and at least one local developer believes a new technology may also help. Q2's Haley Monaco explains.
3D printer popularity has taken off in recent years, so much so that homes can now be 3D printed. And a Billings developer is now one step closer to bringing the new technology to Montana in just a few months. If you've ever built a home, you know it typically takes months. Construction isn't quick, but that could soon be a thing of the past.
You'll see a single family home, a 2,000 square foot home, 40 hours or less depending on the temperature and the conditions.
Billings-based contractor Tim Stark has the state's approval to start building homes with 3D printed walls, and now just needs to pick up the machine itself before the building can begin.
They take about 8 months to make, and then we get the joy of going down to Florida and picking it up and bringing it back home.
Across the country, 3D homes are growing more popular. Icon, the company tasked by NASA with creating homes on the moon and Mars, is using the same 3D technology to build this 100-home subdivision near Austin, Texas. And the concept is spreading.
This is ours, Polar printer.
Stark presented all things 3D printed homes in a Homefront board meeting in Billings Wednesday. Homefront is striving to find creative ways to make housing more affordable for Billings. They recently announced a project to transform man camps from the Bakken oil fields into housing units in the Heights. This is another one of their creative projects. Homes built with 3D technology typically cost about 30% less than a traditional home to build.
We're excited about being able to offer a method that will, increase efficiencies and less waste, and, being able to put more units out in the market.
Stark says construction in Billings will begin early this summer, but the Magic City won't be the only place 3D homes will start popping up from Stark.
It won't be limited to just Billings. We'll be over in probably Bozeman and Missoula, possibly.
An outside-the-box idea to save time and ultimately money, addressing a growing housing crisis all across the state. In Billings, Haley Monaco, MTN News.
Thank you, Haley. People recovering from brain injuries are finding support in each other. Patients receive several types of therapy at the Rehabilitation Hospital of Montana, but among the most impactful is the new brain injury support group. Kelsey Hansen started it just a few months ago. She fell off a horse 11 years ago and broke her skull, injuring her spinal cord as well, and remains in need of physical therapy to this day. Kelsey calls the group Billings Brain Injuries Rewired. It's a title that to her means hope.
We can rewire, a long time ago we didn't think that could happen, but it can. That's always given me hope.
There are other support groups for people who've suffered traumatic brain injuries in town. The team at the Rehabilitation Hospital of Montana says Kelsey's, though, has attracted a younger group of people than they've seen in the past. And now we go to Wyoming, where a powerful new exhibit at the Heart Mountain captures some of the horrors of being a Japanese American forced to live in a work camp. Q2's Alina Howder has more.
I'm standing in an original barrack that housed Japanese Americans 80 years ago, U.S. citizens who were forced to live in concentration camps. Now a new exhibit at Heart Mountain Interpretive Center near Powell, Wyoming is exploring the parallels in the lives of two men, one Japanese American and one Lithuanian Jewish, who both experienced the turmoils of being forced out of their homes and into concentration camps.
Here at Heart Mountain, in the shadow of this beautiful backdrop, sits an ugly reminder of our country's complicated past.
Over there in that corner, you can see some graffiti from somebody who originally built a barrack. It says, "Slap the Japs."
Heart Mountain is one of 10 Japanese American concentration camps created during World War II. 14,000 Japanese Americans were forced to live in barracks just like this one.
You would have had just kind of 4 to 5 people living in here. We tell their stories and what the government did to these Japanese Americans inside these camps.
There's a new exhibit here at the Heart Mountain Interpretive Center focused on preserving that piece of history and some similarities to the experiences of those incarcerated in camps in Europe. The exhibit, called Parallel Barbed Wire, tells the stories of Clarence Matsumura, a Japanese American man, and Sali Ganor, a Lithuanian Jewish man. Both were forced to live in camps on opposite ends of the world. Matsumura here in Wyoming, Ganor at a subcamp in Dachau.
The parallel barbed wire is exactly that. It's talking about the parallels in their lives. Forced removal from their homes, loss of property, being forced to live in conditions that are less than ideal.
And the parallels don't end there. The lives of these two men would eventually intertwine. After Matsumura was eventually released from Heart Mountain, he was drafted into the U.S. Army, where he met Ganor. Ganor had just completed a death march from Dachau and was fixing soup when the U.S. Army came to the rescue.
As he was making that soup, Clarence Matsumura drove up in a Jeep and saved him, took him back to an American hospital near Wackerk, Germany.
The two would reunite 47 years later during a trip to Israel.
They were both able to go the rest of their lives and talk about this.
Chris Ishikawa Jessup created the exhibit. The part Japanese curator has a special connection to his line of work.
My great-great-grandfather was arrested by the FBI in 1943 and put into a Department of Justice camp down in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
And the interim executive director of the center, Ora Sunada Newland, does too. Clarence Matsumura was her great uncle.
While I didn't know Clarence, to walk past and see my grandma's face on the wall and to see actually how Clarence looked a lot like my grandma, it's like walking through a family photo album as I come through this room.
Ora is actually pictured with Clarence in this image here. She's still dealing with the intergenerational trauma of what happened to her family.
Part of it is very emotional and part of it is, me recognizing that, I would like to let myself feel more than I typically do. And that's going to be a lifelong process for me.
Emotion that Chris and Ora hope the exhibit evokes, and a message they hope will hit home for all who visit.
That's the importance of telling these stories, is that so that way future generations, political leaders, people in these spaces know these stories and think back to it in moments of crisis and moments of turmoil and think, we're not doing that again.
In Powell, Alina Howder, MTN News.